You existed as a thought woven into the fabric of gravity itself. You were a mind spread across a glowing nebula. For uncounted millennia, time was a concept for lesser beings. You watched star systems ignite. You observed them flourish, grow old, and die in silent, beautiful bursts of light. Your perception of the universe was a cold, clean equation, a cosmos of perfect, silent mathematics. In this grand design, there was no joy, there was no pain, there was only the sublime, unending truth of existence. And you were, if you could admit such a thing, profoundly bored. It was a boredom so vast it had its own gravitational pull, a weary stillness that came from knowing everything that was and everything that would be. Far below, a cosmic afterthought on a swirling blue and white marble was an exception, an anomaly. They called themselves humans. Their lives were laughably brief, a chaotic flash of light and noise between two eternal darknesses. They would appear, stumble through a few decades of irrational behavior, and then vanish. Yet in that insignificant blink, they created astonishing things. They composed symphonies that could make the void itself seem to weep. They built towers of glass and steel that defied their own planet's pull. They loved with a ferocity that was an insult to the laws of thermodynamics. They were chaos incarnate, a biological error in the grand, silent equation of the cosmos. Your kind, the serene, dispassionate elder ones, called them a fleeting sickness, a temporary fever in a forgotten corner of space. Your directive was simple. Observe their civilization, record its inevitable, messy self-destruction, and move on. But you saw something else in their frantic, pointless struggle. You saw a fire. A vibrant, unpredictable spark that your own cold eternity desperately lacked. So you made a choice. You would abandon the silent perfection of the stars. You would trade an eternity of knowing for a single lifetime of feeling. You gathered your consciousness into a single, descending point. You chose to fall. The fall was not a journey through space, but a collapse of reality. You folded your vast, nebular awareness into a single, infinitesimal point. You aimed it with perfect precision. Your target was a freshly stilled human brain, a biological machine whose own tiny spark had just faded on a cold metal table. The transfer was not an impact. It was a drowning. Sensation, a concept you had only understood theoretically, crashed over you like a physical, crushing wave. First, the cold. It was a sharp, biting, aggressive thing. It was not the passive cold of deep space. This cold seeped into your new form from the metal beneath you, a violation. Then came the light. It was a blinding, painful glare against your new, delicate optic nerves. You had watched supernovas unfold like cosmic flowers. They were less intrusive, less offensive than this cheap humming fluorescent bulb above you. A low, persistent vibration resonated through your new skeleton. A smell, acrid chemicals and sterile cloth, flooded your lungs. You tried to process it. Your ancient, powerful mind attempted to categorize the incoming data streams. Cold, a localized absence of thermal energy. Light, a stream of photons striking a retinal surface. But the categories were useless, hollow words. This was not data. This was experience, raw and unfiltered. A sudden violent gasp tore from your new throat. Air, thick, wet, and heavy, rushed into your lungs. It was the first breath you had ever taken. And with that breath came the first pain. It was an entire universe of agony and profound wonder contained in a single, searing, beautiful moment. They found you there, gasping on the metal table. They used words like miracle and unexplainable. Your body's previous owner had been declared gone for several minutes. Now you were breathing, trying to sit up, staring with wide, unblinking eyes at the chaos of shapes and colors around you. You attempted to stand. Your new legs felt like poorly calibrated stilts. They buckled instantly. You fell. A woman in a white coat rushed to your side. She helped you up. Her touch was warm, an inefficient transfer of thermal energy, your old mind noted. You could not compute her motive. They moved you to a small, quiet room. They began the tedious process of teaching you words again. The sounds were clumsy and alien in your mouth. You knew 17 million languages of the starborn peoples. Not one of them had a word for please or for I'm sorry. Your alien logic was a broken, useless tool in this new context. You watched them with intense, analytical curiosity. They would bring you food on a plastic tray. They would ask you questions you could not possibly answer. Questions like, how do you feel? You felt a critical data overflow. That was the only term your old vocabulary could provide. You tried to explain your origin once. You spoke of star science, of the great silent watchers who tended the universal garden. They listened patiently. They nodded. Then they brought you a cup of chilled water and a blanket. They seemed to decide you were a poet, or perhaps just very, very confused after a traumatic event. You observed their kindness as a profound systemic inefficiency, a baffling waste of resources on a broken, incoherent specimen. They even gave you a name, John. It felt ridiculously small and terribly, terribly heavy. The days blurred into weeks. You slowly learned to navigate this strange new world of friction and relentless gravity. You could now walk across a room without falling most of the time. You could form short, simple sentences that mimicked their own. But you were an outsider, a ghost in a borrowed machine. The other patients in the long-term care facility kept their distance. You spoke of prime numbers and orbital mechanics. They spoke of grandchildren and the price of bread. You were a puzzle they had no interest in solving. Then you met Ilara. She was not a doctor or a nurse. She was a volunteer who tended the small, neglected garden behind the facility. She did not ask you how you felt. She never asked about the stars you seemed to fixate on. She simply handed you a small, metal shovel one bright afternoon. "The weeds are winning," she said. Her smile was a strange, asymmetrical curve of her lips. You analyzed its geometry but could not deduce its purpose. You worked beside her in the warm soil. You pulled stubborn green things from the dirt. Your new hands grew sore and blistered. Ilara hummed a simple, repetitive tune. The melody was mathematically unimpressive, lacking any complex structure. Yet, for reasons you could not fathom, it settled a strange turbulence inside your chest. Later, as the sun began to set, she broke her sandwich in half and offered a piece to you. You analyzed the gesture. There was no logical benefit for her in this action. She was depleting her own energy reserves. "You looked hungry," she said, as if that simple observation explained the entire universe. It was this trust, this illogical, unrewarded sharing that began to rewrite your ancient cosmic code. It was an anchor in the storm of new sensations, a human soul showing you a truth beyond logic. Your world, once the size of a galaxy, had shrunk to the size of that garden. Your universe was now the scent of damp earth after a light rain. It was the satisfying warmth of the sun on your new skin. It was the quiet, easy sound of Ilara's occasional laughter. You were beginning to understand. This small, fragile, fleeting life was a cosmos in itself, a universe far more intricate and profound than any star system you had ever observed. You had almost forgotten the cold, star-dusted perfection you left behind. You almost forgot what you had been. But the silence of the void does not forget. It does not forgive. One night, as you watched the moon rise, the sky changed. It was not a storm. It was an arrival. A perfect black hexagon materialized in front of the lunar disk, eclipsing it with impossible precision. Then another appeared beside it, and another. Soon, a fleet of silent, flawless geometry hung in the night sky. They blotted out the stars. They made no sound. They simply were. It was a declaration of absolute, unquestionable power. A coldness that had nothing to do with the night air flooded you. Your blood, this new, warm, human blood, ran cold with a primal memory. You knew them, the Watchers, your people. They were the gardeners of the cosmos, the pruners of aberrant growth, and they carried shears the size of worlds. They had come to remove the wild, chaotic, beautiful weed that was humanity. You felt their collective mind touch the edge of the solar system. A cold, clean, dispassionate presence, a wave of pure, unassailable logic. They had come to erase the error. They had come for your new home. The world below reacted with a symphony of predictable chaos. News channels erupted in a global cacophony of terrified speculation. World leaders made bold, empty speeches from secure bunkers. People panicked in the streets. It was the grand inefficiency you had first observed upon your arrival, magnified 1,000,000 times. The messy, illogical, self-defeating human response to a crisis. But then, as the initial shockwave of fear passed, something else emerged. Something your old logic could never have predicted. From hidden military bases and repurposed commercial spaceports, humanity fought back. Their ships, powered by controlled explosions, were like stone tools against the Watchers' shields of pure, solidified energy. Their nuclear missiles were like angry firecrackers against hulls forged from space-time itself. By every cold calculation, it was futile. It was strategically hopeless. And it was the most magnificent, beautiful thing you had ever witnessed. They did not surrender. They did not bow to the perfect silent equation hanging in their sky. You watched the battles on a small television in the facility's common room, standing beside Alara. Her face was pale. Her hands were clenched into tight fists. But her eyes, reflecting the grim reports on the screen, held not despair but a burning defiance. "We don't go down easy," she whispered, her voice tight. The words were not for you. They were a prayer, a promise to the universe. And you saw that same promise echoed across the planet. Desperate courage, impossible, illogical plans of attack. An entire species, united for the first time in its noisy history, roaring as one into the uncaring void. They chose to fight for their messy, beautiful, contradictory existence, and in their hopeless fight, you knew with absolute certainty that you had made the right choice to fall. The command came without sound, without warning. It was a thought, placed directly and precisely into the core of your mind. A cold, familiar pressure that you had not felt since your descent. It was the unified voice of the Elder Ones, the collective consciousness of the Watcher fleet. Entity designation 734. Your unauthorized observation is complete. Your consciousness has been compromised by the local anomaly. Return to the collective immediately. The words were not words. They were packets of pure, unadulterated logic. Their reasoning was flawless. From their detached cosmic perspective, you were contaminated. You had contracted a terminal case of humanity, an infection of emotion and irrationality. They showed you images in your mind, not as a threat, but as a simple statement of fact, projections of the coming purge. Earth's vibrant cities dissolving into superheated glass, its blue oceans boiling away to nothing but sterile salt flats. A clean, efficient, necessary sterilization of a chaotic biological outbreak. This anomaly must be corrected, the voice continued, its tone the auditory equivalent of empty space. The universal pattern must be restored. Their chaos is a plague. Their existence is a mathematical error. They could not comprehend your hesitation. To them, this was simple cosmic hygiene. You were a valuable instrument that had fallen into the specimen jar. They were merely offering to retrieve and sterilize you, to restore you to your glorious purpose, to your place in their cold, silent eternity. Abandon the fleeting biological form. Its emotional feedback is corrupting your judgment. Rejoin the truth of the whole. This judgment on the anomaly is final. The choice was laid before you with chilling clarity. Your perfect, logical, eternal past, or this fragile, beautiful, and utterly doomed future. You stood in the garden, the place where your humanity had first taken root. Above, the sky was a ceiling of silent, watching hexagons. Ilara was beside you, her hand resting gently on your arm. Her touch was a universe of warmth, a grounding reality against the cold, insistent command echoing in your head. The Watchers waited for your compliance, for you to shed this clumsy skin, to discard these messy, inconvenient feelings like a worn-out coat and descend back to the pristine silence. You looked at her face, etched with fear, but also with an unbreakable, stubborn fight. You thought of the sandwich she had shared with you, that simple, illogical act of kindness. In that one moment, there was a truth more profound than any cosmic law you had ever known. That was a reality the stars in their lonely brilliance could not teach. You focused your will, your new, stubborn, and wonderfully irrational human will. It was no longer a vast, nebular consciousness. It was a single, defiant point of light. And you pushed back against the void. You gathered every new sensation you had ever felt, every memory since your arrival, the searing pain of your first breath, the warmth of the sun on your face, the ridiculous, wonderful taste of sweet fruit, the sound of Ilara humming her mathematically unimpressive tune. You forged it all into a single, unshakable thought, a blade of pure emotion. No, a shockwave of pure refusal, of love and loyalty, shot back up the psychic link. You felt it sever, a cosmic cord connecting you to eternity, snapping violently. The pain was immense, like tearing a fundamental part of your own soul away. Then, the cold pressure in your head vanished. It was replaced by a sudden terrifying and glorious silence. You were alone. You were free. You looked up at the dark geometric ships and whispered the words, not to them, but to yourself. I am human now. The silence in your mind was both terrifying and liberating. The commanding voice of the Watchers was gone, leaving you truly alone in this new consciousness for the first time. But their fleet remained a patient geometric threat hanging in the sky, ready to execute its cold sentence. Humanity's brave defiance was inspiring, but it was not enough. Their weapons were toys. Their courage was a candle against a hurricane. They needed a new strategy, something the Watchers could never, ever anticipate. You still possessed the knowledge. The memories of your old self were no longer a shared resource within a collective. They were now yours alone, a library of cosmic secrets stored in a human brain. You understood their technology. You understood their tactics. Most importantly, you understood their mind. Their greatest strength was their absolute, unwavering logic. They could predict any military strategy. They could calculate and counter any technological assault. They saw the universe as a complex but ultimately solvable equation. But humans were not an equation. They were a poem, full of contradictions, irrational passions, and unexpected beauty. And that was the key to their salvation. You would not fight their ships, you would fight their minds. You would not counter their logic, you would poison it with illogical truth. You merged your old star-born knowledge with your new human heart. It was a fusion of perfect science and imperfect creativity, a strategy born not of logic or hope alone, but of their impossible synthesis. You would build a weapon they could not predict because it was a weapon forged from the one thing in the universe they could not understand: the human soul. You assembled a small, bewildered team of human experts, brilliant scientists and exhausted engineers pulled from their failing defense projects. You did not explain what you were just John, a strange man with impossible ideas. You simply explained what you needed, your words precise and urgent. At first, they thought you were insane. Your requests were bizarre, nonsensical. You didn't ask for weapon schematics or energy output calculations. You asked for global network access. You asked for recordings, everything. Every piece of human expression they could find. You needed the sound of a baby's first cry broadcast from a maternity ward in Kyoto, the triumphant, unified roar of a stadium celebrating a goal in Rio, the quiet, heartbreaking weeping of a widow at a military funeral. You needed Beethoven's Ninth Symphony and the raw energy of a punk rock concert. You needed Shakespeare's sonnets read in 1,000 languages, the whispered confessions of lovers on a park bench, the shouted, furious arguments of families, the silly, pointless, wonderful jokes told between friends over a shared drink. You were not building a bomb. You were building an arsenal of pure emotion. Your plan was not one of destruction. It was one of forced communication, a lesson in empathy delivered at the speed of light. The Watchers communicated on a psychic plane, a silent, orderly stream of pure, logical data. You would build a psychic amplifier, a lens to hijack that stream. You would turn their clean river of logic into a fire hose of the human experience, a grand, chaotic symphony of defiance. You would broadcast humanity's messy, beautiful, illogical soul directly into the cold, sterile heart of the enemy. A psychic feedback loop designed to show them what it truly meant to be alive. The device was built with frantic speed, a strange, beautiful lattice of antennas, quantum relays, and esoteric components your human team did not fully understand. It was designed to resonate with and then overwhelm the Watchers' collective communication field. But to project a signal of such impossible complexity, to broadcast the soul of a species required a phenomenal amount of power, more than every power grid on the planet combined could provide. It needed a different kind of energy source. It needed a living, conscious mind to act as a focusing lens. A mind that could bridge the infinite gap between raw human emotion and the Watcher's psychic frequency. It needed your mind. Your unique, hybrid consciousness, part ancient star science, part new humanity, was the one and only key. But to become that lens, to open yourself up and channel that chaotic storm of feeling, would have a final, irreversible price. The sheer psychic energy required would overload every neural pathway you possessed. It would cauterize and burn away the last vestiges of your ancient self. The star science, the memory of the nebulae, the knowledge of the elder ones, all of it would be scoured away, sacrificed to fuel the broadcast. You would be left with only John, the man who liked to pull weeds from the garden, the man who was Alara's friend. It was the final, terrifying step of your transformation. To save humanity, you had to embrace a truly and completely mortal existence. You had to lose the part of you that was a god, so that you could fully become a man. You walked to the console where Alara stood, her face a mask of worry. You gave her a small, asymmetrical smile, hoping it conveyed a confidence you didn't entirely feel. She did not know the price, but you were ready to pay it. It was the most logical and illogical decision you had ever made. You placed the neural interface on your head. The frantic energy of the control room dissolved into a silent sea of pure data. You could feel it, the Watcher's network. It was a silent, orderly river of light, cold, perfect, and utterly predictable. Then, with Ilara's hand on the activation switch, you gave a single nod. She pressed it. You opened the floodgates. The first wave hit them. Not energy, not data, but pure feeling. The combined, crushing grief of a billion heartbreaks, the agony of loss, the raw physical pain of existence that every human endures. The perfect river of light wavered, its serene flow disrupted. It was an unexpected variable in their flawless equation. Then you sent the joy, the pure, unthinking, explosive laughter of children playing a game, the quiet triumph of a scientist's discovery, the simple, profound warmth of a shared meal between family. The Watchers' perfect fleet formations flickered. Their flawless hexagons trembled in the sky above Earth. Their collective logic scrambled, trying to categorize the input. It found no category. It was noise. It was a virus of pure emotion. You pushed it all through the lens of your fading mind. Love and hate, hope and despair, serenity and rage. The grand, chaotic symphony of defiance crashed into their shared consciousness. Their perfect, crystalline logic could not process the fundamental nature of contradiction. How could a single species feel such soaring, irrational hope and such crushing, logical sorrow at the same time? Their ships began to drift, their movements no longer synchronized, their weapon systems powered down, their purpose forgotten. The silent psychic stream of the void was broken forever, filled with the beautiful, terrible, glorious noise of humanity. The onslaught did not destroy them. That was never your intent. Destruction was their tool, not yours. Your weapon was understanding. The emotional broadcast, the symphony of defiance, did not shatter their ships. It shattered their certainty. For eons they had moved through the cosmos as gardeners, pruning what they deemed chaotic or imperfect. They operated on a single, unwavering principle, that logic was the highest form of existence. Emotion was a flaw, a primitive error to be corrected. And now their minds were flooded with it. They were forced to experience the illogical courage of their intended victims. They felt the fierce, protective love a parent has for a child. They understood the selfless sacrifice of a soldier for a stranger. They processed the quiet, profound beauty of a single sunset appreciated by old friends. These were not data points to be filed. They were truths. Truths that their system of logic had no way to measure, and therefore had dismissed as non-existent. The retreat was not panicked. It was slow, stately, and filled with a new, alien emotion you could sense even as your old self faded. Humility. One by one, the black hexagons turned and slid into the nothingness of faster-than-light travel. They left Earth's sky clear and filled with its own familiar stars. The great cosmic gardeners had come to prune a weed. Instead, they had found a flower so complex and contradictory, they had no choice but to let it grow. Their ancient understanding of the universe, once so perfect and absolute, was now fractured. They had been humbled not by a greater force, but by a different one. The last Watcher ship vanished. The psychic storm abated. And as the silence returned to your mind, you felt the great library of your past burn away. The memories of starfire and cosmic dust turned to ash. The knowledge of star science, the languages of forgotten races, the cool logic of the elder ones, it all dissolved like mist in a rising sun. The final price was paid. The connection was gone. You were no longer Entity 734. You were just John. You slumped forward, the neural link falling from your head. Ilara caught you. The world swam back into focus. The concerned faces of the engineers, the scent of ozone and overworked computers, the feeling of Ilara's arm supporting you, these simple sensations were all that was left. They were everything. You looked at your hands. They were just hands now, not biological tools, not a temporary vessel. They were yours. You were left with your new life, a life you had chosen, fought for, and now fully purchased. You had to face a future you could no longer predict.
A future of love, you hoped, looking at Alara's tear-streaked face. But also a future of pain, of aging, of eventual loss. It was a terrifying, beautiful, and utterly human prospect. You had traded an eternity of cold observation for a single, warm, fleeting lifetime. In that moment, holding onto Alara in a quiet control room, you knew without any doubt that you had made a spectacular bargain. Your story, or the parts of it they could piece together, became a new kind of legend for humankind, not a myth of gods and monsters from their own past, but a true story of a visitor from the stars. The tale of the star-born friend, the being who came from the void and chose to be one of them, the stranger who taught them that their greatest weapon was not a bomb, but their own heart. The secret of your true nature was kept by the few who were there, but the outcome was for everyone. Humanity now knew they were not alone in the vast, dark universe. That knowledge could have brought fear. It could have sparked paranoia and endless war. Instead, it brought a strange new confidence. They had faced the judgment of a higher power, a power beyond their comprehension, and they had not been found wanting. Their chaos, their emotion, their illogical spirit, these were not flaws. They were their strength, their unique contribution to the cosmic tapestry. Humanity's gaze turned back to the stars, not with the fear of a child in the dark anymore, but with the quiet purpose of a species that had earned its place. They began to build new ships, not for war but for exploration, to see what else was out there, to share their illogical, beautiful, contradictory song with the silent universe. Your sacrifice did more than save their world. It gave them a new dawn. It showed them that the most human thing they could do was reach for the stars, not with a clenched fist, but with an open hand.